You'll get half of nothing. That's what my husband said across our kitchen table with divorce papers beside his coffee mug and his girlfriend's texts lighting up his phone. He thought he had already moved the money far enough away that I couldn't reach it. He thought the contracting business we built together would look broke on paper. He thought I was just the wife who answered phones, paid invoices, and kept quiet when he called himself the brains of the operation. But 9 months later, in a courtroom so quiet I could hear the judge turn a page, a forensic accountant put one diagram on the screen. Shell vendor, hidden account, fake loans, girlfriend's relatives. And that was the moment my husband finally understood the one thing he'd forgotten. I knew the books before he knew how to read them. Before we go any further, thank you for being here. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because stories like this always seem to find someone who needed to hear them. A quick note: some details have been changed for privacy and storytelling, but the emotions at the heart of it are real. And if you've ever been underestimated by somebody who thought silence meant ignorance, you'll understand why I remember every second of what happened next. When I think about the end of my marriage, I don't think first about the affair. I know that sounds strange. An affair should be the thing that splits your life into before and after. It should be the wound you keep touching because you can't believe it's there. But for me, the affair was almost the simple part. Ugly, yes. Humiliating, yes. But simple. There was another woman. There were messages. There were hotel charges he thought I wouldn't see. There was perfume in his truck that didn't belong to me, and a birthday dinner he missed because a client had an emergency at 7:30 on a Saturday night. What I think about first is the kitchen table. It was a gray Thursday in February, the kind of day where the sky looked like wet concrete and every light in the house felt too yellow. I was standing barefoot by the sink, rinsing a mug I hadn't finished using, when Russell came in with a manila envelope tucked under his arm. He was wearing the navy quilted vest he liked because it made him look like the owner of a company instead of a guy who still had drywall dust in the seams of his truck seats. He set the envelope down like he was dropping off a bid packet. "We need to talk," he said. That was how he opened it. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I messed up." Not even, "Carmen, sit down." Just, "We need to talk," as if I were an employee who had missed a deadline. I dried my hands on a dish towel and looked at the envelope. I already knew. You don't live with a man for 17 years and miss the little tells. He'd been too careful with his phone. Too irritated when I asked normal questions, too generous with explanations nobody requested. 2 weeks before that, he'd started sleeping with his screen facing down, even though for years he used to toss his phone anywhere. A week before that, he changed the password to the shared business email and told me it was because the guys keep clicking dumb stuff. The morning before the envelope, he moved the spare checkbooks from the desk drawer in the office. So when he slid the papers out, my stomach dropped, but it didn't surprise me. "I filed," he said. I looked at the first page. Petition for dissolution of marriage. My name looked wrong in that font. Too small, too official, too easy to print. "You filed," I said. "Yeah." He pulled out a chair and sat like we were about to discuss lumber prices. "It doesn't have to be ugly." That was the first lie. I had helped him build Blackwell Custom Contracting from the back of a dented Ford and a magnetic sign we ordered online. When we got married, Russell had tools, charm, and a habit of underestimating paperwork. I had a bookkeeping certificate, 8 years in accounts payable for a plumbing supply company, and the kind of brain that enjoyed making columns match. We started with one remodel job for my cousin's neighbor. Russell did the work. I created the estimates, called vendors, tracked receipts, filed sales tax, chased customers, and sat at our old card table on Sunday nights with a calculator and a stack of invoices. For the first 3 years, we couldn't afford a real office. The business lived in a corner of our dining room. There were boxes of cabinet pulls under the buffet and tile samples stacked where wedding china was supposed to go. I made payroll from a laptop with a cracked hinge. Russell would come home exhausted, boots leaving dust in the hall, and say, "I don't know what I'd do without you." I believed him. That was the embarrassing part. Not that he cheated. People cheat every day. The embarrassing part was that for years I believed he saw me. I believed when he bragged at barbecues that Carmen keeps the place running, he meant it. I believed when he kissed the top of my head while I reconciled bank statements, he understood the work in front of me. I believed we were tired together, broke together, building together. Then the business got bigger. One crew became two. Two became five. We rented a small office in a strip building between a dentist and a tax preparer. Russell hired an estimator, then a project manager, then an office manager named Denise, who wore reading glasses on a chain and kept peppermint tea in her top drawer. I trained her on our system. I showed her how we categorized deposits, how we matched draw payments to job codes, which suppliers were slow to apply credits, and which clients always needed a second reminder before paying. Russell started calling himself president. I didn't mind. Honestly, I was proud of him. He was good with clients. He could walk through a half-finished kitchen, point at a crooked cabinet box, and know which wall was out of square. He could calm down a homeowner who was 6 weeks into a renovation and ready to cry because there was plastic over the doorway and no sink. He had a gift for making people feel like he could fix whatever was broken. But as the checks got bigger, something changed in him. It wasn't sudden. It was like watching a stain spread under paint. He stopped saying we. He said my company, my crews, my reputation. When we bought a new truck, he said he earned it. When I reminded him the quarterly taxes were due, he acted like I was nagging instead of preventing a lien. At Christmas parties, he introduced me as my wife, Carmen, and introduced Denise as our office manager, as if my actual role had evaporated the second someone else sat at the front desk. By the time the divorce papers hit our kitchen table, he'd already rewritten the story in his head. He was the builder. I was the wife. "I've had an attorney draft a proposal," he said. He slid another packet toward me. I didn't touch it at first. I watched his hand. He had a new watch. Not wildly expensive, but expensive enough that I noticed it. He used to ask me before spending more than $200 on anything personal. Now he had a watch I hadn't seen, a haircut I hadn't paid for, and a confidence that didn't belong to a man who was sorry. "A proposal," I said. "A fair one." I picked up the packet. The numbers were insulting in a way that made my ears ring. He valued the business at barely more than the used equipment. He listed our savings as almost nothing. He included debt I didn't recognize. He proposed I keep my car, half the furniture, and a small cash payment spread over 18 months. There was a paragraph about each party being responsible for their own attorney's fees. There was another paragraph saying I acknowledged the business had limited value because of reduced revenue and uncertain market conditions. Reduced revenue. I almost laughed. 2 months earlier, I had watched a $68,000 deposit come in for the Beaumont edition. 3 weeks before that, I had seen 3 progress payments from the Ralston job. We had a backlog into August. Russell had complained at dinner that he couldn't find enough skilled guys to keep up. "Where is the rest?" I asked. His face didn't move, but his eyes did. Just a flicker. "The rest of what?" "The business value, the cash, the receivables, the jobs in progress." He leaned back and folded his arms. "This is exactly why I wanted attorneys involved." "Because I asked where the money went?" "Because you don't understand the bigger picture." There it was. Not the first time he'd said it, but the first time he said it while trying to take my future apart. I set the proposal down. I understand enough. He smiled then. Small. Mean. Like he had been waiting for me to give him that line. No, Carmen. You understand QuickBooks. You don't understand ownership, liability, market risk. You don't understand what a judge is going to see when they look at a contracting company with debt, old trucks, and cash flow problems. I stared at him. He tapped the packet with 2 fingers. Take the deal, it'll save both of us money. And if I don't? He stood. He didn't shout. Russell rarely shouted when he felt in control. He used a quieter voice, the one he used with subcontractors he was about to short on a final payment. Then you'll spend money you don't have chasing money that isn't there. I said nothing. He picked up his envelope and tucked it under his arm again. Then, with one hand already on the back door, he gave me the line that stayed with me for almost a year. You'll get half of nothing. He said it like a joke, like a mercy, like he was teaching me the rules of a world he owned. I didn't answer. I just stood there in my own kitchen, barefoot on cold tile, listening to his truck start in the driveway. For about 5 minutes, I did nothing. I couldn't. My body felt unplugged. The papers were still on the table. The mug sat by the sink. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, his tires hissed on the wet street. I remember all of it because when your life changes, your brain saves stupid details. The chipped corner of the envelope, the tiny bubble in the laminate table where a hot pan had damaged it years before. The way my left hand kept opening and closing around the dish towel. Then I walked into the office. Not the company office. Our home office. The little room that used to be a guest bedroom before the business swallowed it. There were still old banker boxes in the closet, even though Russell had spent the last year telling me we didn't need to keep so much paper anymore. He had wanted everything moved to the office server. He said I was old school. Maybe I was. But when you start a business at a card table, you learn that software is only as useful as the person entering the truth into it. I opened the closet and looked at the labels. 2018 bank statements, 2019 vendor files, 2020 job closeouts, tax support, equipment, payroll. I didn't know yet what I was looking for. I only knew Russell had made one mistake. He thought contempt was the same as strategy. He thought because he had spent the last few years pushing me out of daily operations, I'd stopped understanding the structure underneath. He forgot who built the chart of accounts. He forgot who created the job cost categories. He forgot who knew the difference between a legitimate materials draw and a number shoved into cost of goods sold because it made income look smaller. He forgot that before he ever called himself president, I was the one who knew where every dollar went. The first night, I didn't touch a single file. I was too shaken. I sat on the floor with a box open beside me and cried in the ugly, silent way you cry when you don't want the neighbors to hear. Not because I wanted him back. That part had already broken. I cried because I could see the shape of his plan. He wasn't just leaving. He was leaving with the money we had built together, and he wanted me scared enough to sign before I learned what he'd done. Around midnight, my sister Marisol called. Marisol is 4 years younger than me and has always sounded like she was born holding a clipboard. She works as a paralegal in a family law firm, not as an attorney, which she reminded everyone at Thanksgiving whenever somebody tried to get free legal advice. She had known something was wrong because I ignored 3 texts in a row. That was our family emergency code. If Carmen didn't answer, somebody was either dead or hiding in a bathroom trying not to fall apart. "Talk to me," she said when I picked up. I couldn't say divorce. I couldn't say affair. So I said, "He filed." There was a pause. Then she said, "Okay, are you safe?" That question made me cry harder. "I'm safe." "Is he in the house?" "No." "Good. Do not sign anything." I wasn't going to. "No, listen to me. Do not sign anything. Do not text him anything emotional. Do not call him names. Do not threaten him. Do not tell him you know anything, even if you know something, especially if you know something. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. He says there's no money. Marisol made a sound through her nose. Not a laugh. More like a file drawer closing. There's always money, she said. The question is where it went. The next morning, I made coffee. I didn't drink and called an attorney from the parking lot of a grocery store because I didn't want Russell to see the number on the house phone records. Her name was Elena Park. She had a calm voice and did not use phrases like moving forward or fresh start, which I appreciated. I told her the basics: marriage length, business, divorce papers, low offer, possible affair, possible money movement. She listened without interrupting. Then she asked, "Were you involved in the business finances?" I almost said yes, in a small way. That was the habit Russell had trained into me. Shrink the sentence before somebody else shrinks it for you. Instead, I said, I set up the books. I handled accounts payable and receivable for years. I trained the office manager. I still have records. There was the tiniest pause on the line. Not surprise exactly. Interest. Good, Elena said. That helps. 2 words. That helps. I sat in my car watching people push carts through the drizzle, and for the first time since Russell put the envelope on the table, I took a full breath. Elena told me to gather financial records but not to break into anything, not to access accounts I wasn't authorized to access, and not to take company property from the office. She was precise about that. Your credibility matters, she said. If this turns into a concealment case, we need clean hands. We use what you have a right to have, and we subpoena the rest. Clean hands. That became one of the rules I live by. I went home and made a list. Not an emotional list. A bookkeeping list. Bank statements, credit card statements, tax returns, loan applications, job reports, vendor files, payroll summaries, equipment purchase records, personal financial statements we had submitted to lenders, old emails between me and Denise, anything that showed what the business had been earning before Russell suddenly discovered poverty. That was the first real thing I did after my marriage ended. I didn't smash his things. I didn't call the girlfriend. I didn't post on Facebook. I sat at the dining room table with a legal pad and wrote categories. It sounds cold. It wasn't. My hands shook so badly I had to rewrite the first page because I couldn't read my own handwriting. But the act of making columns steadied me. Debits on one side, credits on the other. Assets, liabilities, income, expenses. When the rest of your life becomes fog, a ledger is a railing. For 17 years, Russell had mistaken my quiet for weakness. That was easy for him to do because quiet had benefited him. Quiet meant I stayed up late fixing payroll instead of making him feel guilty. Quiet meant I smiled when clients thanked him for building a great company, while I knew he'd forgotten to invoice the last draw until I reminded him. Quiet meant I didn't correct him when he told people he handled all the hard parts. But quiet had also made me observant. I knew that in normal years our gross receipts did not drop by 40% unless a recession hit or Russell stopped depositing checks. I knew our materials costs moved roughly with revenue, not wildly ahead of it. I knew which vendors we used for lumber, fixtures, roofing, concrete, electrical, waste hauling, and permits. I knew their naming conventions. I knew their invoice formats. I knew which checks were always even numbers because they were subcontractor draws, and which had odd cents because they came from supplier statements. So when I started looking through the documents I already had, the first red flag wasn't dramatic. It was boring. A vendor name: North Star Site Services. I saw it on a printout from the office that Denise had given me months earlier when I was helping her clean up 1,099 reports. At the time, it had meant nothing. A new vendor, probably hauling or prep. We had lots of small vendors. But now, with Russell's proposal claiming reduced income and rising costs, the name snagged in my head. North Star Site Services, $8,400. North Star Site Services, $11,750. North Star Site Services, $6,200. The payments had started small, then grown. They were coded to job expenses across different projects. That made them harder to spot. A little buried under the Beaumont addition, a little under the Ralston kitchen, a little under 2 bathroom remodels. If you looked job by job, nothing screamed. If you sorted by vendor across the year, North Star looked very busy for a company I had never heard anyone mention. I texted Denise from my personal phone. "Are you still at the office?" She replied 10 minutes later. "Yes. You okay?" That question nearly broke me because Denise was the only person at the office who still treated me like I belonged to the business. "Can you talk later?" I wrote. She didn't answer right away. Then, after 6. Not on office phone. That told me something before she said a word. Denise called me from her car at 6:18. I could hear rain tapping on her windshield. "Carmen," she said quietly, "I don't want to be in the middle." "I know." "Russell told me not to discuss company finances with you." That landed like a hand around my throat. "When?" "Last week." "Before he filed?" Silence. "Denise." She sighed. "Yes." I closed my eyes. "I won't ask you to send me anything. I won't ask you to do anything that puts your job at risk. I just need to know if I'm crazy." "About what?" "North Star Site Services." The rain on her windshield sounded louder. "I hated those invoices," she said. My pulse changed. "Why?" "Because they were weird. No phone number at first. No real detail. Just site prep or consulting support." I asked Russell for W-9 information, and he said he had it handled. Then later he gave me one, but it looked like somebody filled it out in a hurry. "Do you know who owns it?" "No." "Did we ever use them on actual sites?" Denise laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "Carmen, I asked Mike. I asked Tony. Nobody knew them." Mike was our project manager. Tony ran one of the crews. If neither of them knew a site services vendor, that vendor was not doing site services. "How much?" I asked. "I don't know exact. More than 50,000. Maybe more than that." I wrote it down. "There's something else," she said. I stopped writing. Russell started having me cut checks to 2 individuals. Not payroll, not subs. He called them short-term loans. "Names?" She hesitated. "Denise, if you can't tell me, don't." One was Marco Alvarez. One was Talia Benitez. I didn't know those names. Not then. "What were the loans for?" He said family emergency. He said they were private, owner-approved advances. I told him they shouldn't run through the company if they were personal. "What did he say?" Denise exhaled. He said, "Just enter it the way I told you." That sounded like Russell. Not angry, not loud. Just the owner voice. "Did you?" "Yes," she said, and her voice cracked a little. "I need this job." "I know." I kept notes. I looked up from the legal pad. What? Not copies. Notes. Dates. Check numbers. What he told me. Because I had a bad feeling. That was the first time I understood Denise might become more than a worried office manager. She might become the witness Russell never planned for, but I still didn't know about the girlfriend's family. I didn't know about the hidden account. I didn't know that the money trail would eventually lead to a credit union branch 20 miles away, where Russell had opened an account using a business address we hadn't used in 6 years. At that point, I only had a vendor name, 2 personal names, and the cold knowledge that my husband had started building his exit before he handed me the papers. What he didn't know, and what made everything after this possible, was that I had years of normal records sitting in boxes. Not perfect records, not dramatic records, just boring, consistent, dated records, the kind nobody appreciates until somebody lies. Russell's first official financial disclosure arrived 3 weeks later. Elena emailed it to me with one sentence: "Please review and mark anything that looks inaccurate." It was 76 pages, and I read every page twice. The first pass made me angry. The second pass made me useful. He claimed the business had experienced substantial revenue compression due to market volatility. That was a phrase his attorney had probably written. Russell did not say revenue compression. Russell said, "People are cheap and nobody wants to pay for quality." He listed gross monthly income that would barely cover payroll. He listed equipment values like every truck had been driven into a pond. He listed the company bank balances as of the date of separation, and they were low enough to make the business look fragile. But the thing about a balance is that it only tells you what was there on one date. It does not tell you what moved out the week before. I pulled the old bank statements I had at home. Then I pulled the personal statements. Then I made a spreadsheet. I didn't call it fraud. Elena had warned me not to get ahead of myself. I called it questions. Question 1. Why did company deposits drop sharply after October when active jobs did not? Question 2. Why did North Star Site Services receive $73,420 over 7 months when no project manager recognized the vendor? Question 3. Why were loans issued to Marco Alvarez and Talia Benitez, neither of whom appeared in payroll, subcontractor files, or vendor lists? Question 4. Why did Russell's personal credit card show meals, travel, and jewelry purchases inconsistent with the income he claimed? Question 5. Why did the business pay down a line of credit early in January, then claim cash flow stress in February? I kept going until I had 19 questions. When I sent the spreadsheet to Elena, she called me within an hour. "Carmen," she said, "this is good work." I almost cried again, not because I needed praise, because for months, maybe years, Russell had spoken to me like I was furniture. Hearing someone competent look at my work and recognize it felt like getting a piece of my own name back. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we request documents. If they don't produce them, we compel. And based on this, I want to talk to a forensic accountant." Forensic accountant. It sounded expensive. It sounded like a television word. I said the practical thing. "Can I afford that?" Elena didn't sugarcoat it. "It's not cheap, but if there's concealment, we can ask the court to allocate fees. The problem is we have to get far enough to prove it. And if we don't, then we still need to know what the estate actually is before you settle." That was the sentence I held on to. Before you settle. Because Russell started pushing settlement hard after that. At first, it was through attorneys. Formal letters. His attorney said my requests were overbroad. His attorney said the business was separate from my limited household role, which made Marisol curse so loudly over the phone that her dog started barking. His attorney said prolonged litigation would unnecessarily deplete marital resources. His attorney offered a slightly higher number, still spread over 18 months, still based on the idea that the business was worth almost nothing. Then Russell started contacting me directly. The first text came at 10:42 on a Tuesday night. "We don't need lawyers draining us. You know that." I took a screenshot and sent it to Elena. She replied the next morning. "Do not engage except through counsel." The next message came 2 days later. "You always said you wanted peace. This isn't peace." Then, "Your sister is filling your head with nonsense." Then, "You're going to end up with less after fees." Don't be stupid. I didn't answer any of them. That made him angrier. Russell had always preferred a reaction. Even during our marriage, if he couldn't win an argument, he would try to make me emotional enough to lose my point. He'd sigh. He'd call me dramatic. He'd say, "See, this is why I don't talk to you." And I would end up apologizing for my tone while the original issue slipped off the table. Divorce gave me one advantage. I finally had written instructions not to play, so I screenshotted everything. I put each message in a folder. I labeled them by date. I did not answer. That is when he got personal. He canceled the health insurance card he said he would keep active until temporary orders. He claimed it was a payroll system error. He changed the streaming passwords, which was petty enough to be funny for about 4 seconds. He took the better laptop from the house while I was at my mother's, even though it had family photos on it. He told mutual friends I was trying to destroy the company because I was bitter about the divorce. The affair became public in the stupidest way possible. His girlfriend, Kendra, posted a photo from a steakhouse with 2 wine glasses and Russell's hand in the corner. I knew his hand. The square knuckles. The scar by his thumb from a table saw guard he ignored in 2011. She captioned it, "Finally being chosen feels different." Marisol sent me the screenshot with no comment, which is how I knew she was furious. I looked at that photo for a long time. Not because I wanted him back. Because of the wine glasses. The restaurant was one of the expensive ones downtown. Not anniversary expensive, client dinner expensive. The kind of place Russell used to say was, for people with more money than sense. He was claiming reduced income while taking Kendra to a place where appetizers cost what I used to spend on groceries for 3 days. I saved the screenshot. Then I looked at Kendra's profile. I know people tell you not to do that. Sometimes people are right. This time, curiosity had a ledger attached. Kendra Benitez. Benitez. I sat up straight. Talia Benitez. One of the loan names Denise had given me. I didn't message anyone. I didn't make accusations online. I didn't throw the phone. I took a screenshot of Kendra's public profile where her family members were tagged in old birthday posts. Talia appeared in a comment thread as Auntie T. Marco Alvarez appeared in another post with a caption about cousins. The room got very still. I sent the screenshots to Elena with the subject line, "Possible connection to company loans." She called 10 minutes later. "Where did you get these?" "Public posts." "Good. Don't dig into anything private, don't friend anyone, don't contact anyone." "I won't." "But yes," she said, and I could hear the shift in her voice. "This matters." Russell thought he was moving money into fog. He was actually moving it into a family tree. The first court hearing was for temporary orders. Nothing dramatic happened there, which almost made it worse. I think people imagine court as a place where truth bursts through the doors with a soundtrack. Most of the time, court is beige walls, bad coffee, and people trying not to look scared in plastic chairs. Russell arrived with his attorney and Kendra's perfume on his jacket. I didn't see her, but I smelled it when he walked past. Sweet and sharp. He didn't look at me at first. Then he did, and his expression had that same small smile from the kitchen. Poor Carmen, out of her depth. Elena sat beside me and opened a folder. "Let him perform," she murmured. His attorney argued that the business was struggling, that Russell needed access to company funds to keep employees paid, that I had limited involvement in recent operations, and that my document requests were burdensome. Elena argued for support, preservation of assets, production of records, and an order preventing either party from moving or dissipating marital funds outside ordinary business. The judge was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair cut blunt at her jaw. She listened more than she spoke. When Russell's attorney called my role administrative help, her pen stopped moving. Elena noticed. I noticed Elena noticing. When it was our turn, Elena said, "My client was not merely administrative help. She set up the bookkeeping system, managed payables and receivables for years, trained the current office manager, and has identified specific transactions that require explanation." Russell shifted in his chair. "Not much. Enough." The judge ordered temporary support, restrained unusual transfers, and set deadlines for document production. It wasn't a victory parade. It didn't solve anything. But Russell walked out less pleased than he had walked in. In the hallway, he broke the direct contact rule before we even reached the elevator. "You think this makes you smart?" he said. Elena turned slowly. I kept my eyes on the elevator doors. "Mr. Blackwell," Elena said, "communicate through counsel." He ignored her. "You have no idea what you're doing, Carmen." The elevator dinged. I stepped inside. He stayed in the hallway, blocked by Elena's stare and his own attorney's hand on his sleeve. Just before the doors closed, he said, "You're burning money you don't have. You—" He was wrong about a lot of things, but not that. The next few months were financially terrifying. Temporary support helped, but it did not create stability. Russell was late twice. The first time, he blamed payroll timing. The second time, he blamed me for forcing court nonsense. The mortgage still came due. My car needed brakes. Attorney invoices arrived with numbers that made my stomach turn. Every time Elena forwarded a letter from Russell's attorney objecting to discovery, I could hear a cash register in my head. Marisol made me a budget on a Saturday afternoon while I sat at her kitchen island and tried not to panic. She had 3 highlighters, a calculator, and the emotional softness of a prison warden when money was involved. "You are not paying for pride," she said. "It feels like pride." "No. Pride would be refusing to negotiate because you're mad. This is refusing to sign a lie because you're scared. Different thing." I rubbed my forehead. "What if he did hide it well enough? Then we'll know that. And if I can't afford to know?" Marisol put the highlighter down. "Carmen, he is counting on that exact sentence." That shut me up. She was right. Russell didn't need to win every legal argument. He needed to make the process painful enough that I chose relief over truth. That was his real leverage, not the business, not the accounts, my exhaustion, and he used it. In April, he emptied the joint household account, not the business account, not a huge investment account, the household checking account where my temporary support had landed and where the mortgage drafted from. He took $4,860. The transaction hit on a Monday morning. I found out at the grocery store. I had gone in for boring things: milk, eggs, rice, chicken thighs, laundry detergent, the brand of coffee my mother liked because she had started sleeping over when I couldn't stand the house alone. The total was $146.82. I remember because the cashier said it in that tired, sing-song voice cashiers use when they've said numbers all day. I put my card in. Declined. I thought it was the chip. I tried again. Declined. The cashier looked away politely. The woman behind me pretended to study gum. My ears went hot. I opened the banking app with my thumb shaking so hard Face ID failed twice. Available balance: $17.33. For a second, I couldn't understand what I was seeing. Then the transaction loaded. Online transfer. $4,860. Russell. The cashier said, "Do you have another card?" I did. Technically. A credit card with a limit I was trying not to touch because Elena's retainer had eaten most of it. I used it. I smiled like nothing was happening. I loaded the bags into the car and sat behind the steering wheel while the ice cream melted in the trunk. That was the lowest point. Not the kitchen table, not the steakhouse post. That grocery store. There is a special kind of fear that comes when your card is declined for food. It doesn't matter that you know the reason. It doesn't matter that you're not irresponsible. Your body doesn't care about context. Your body hears decline and thinks danger. I called Russell from the parking lot. I know. Elena had told me not to. Marisol had told me not to. Common sense had told me not to. But fear is not a paralegal. He answered on the fourth ring. What did you do? I asked. Good morning to you too. The joint account is empty. I moved funds to cover business obligations. That was household money. It was marital money. The mortgage draft's Friday. Then maybe you should consider the settlement. There it was. The real reason. I gripped the steering wheel. Russell? His voice softened in a way that made it worse. Carmen, listen to me. I know you're upset. But this is getting out of hand. Elena is billing you for a fantasy. There is no hidden treasure. There is no big pot of money. There is a struggling business and two people who need to be realistic. You emptied the account. I moved funds. Without telling me. Do you want to fight about wording? Or do you want to solve your problem? I closed my eyes. Take the revised offer, he said. I'll have my attorney send it today. You'll have money by next week. You can stop worrying. For a moment, I almost said yes. I want to be honest about that because revenge stories can make the protagonist sound braver than she felt. I was not brave in that car. I was tired. I was humiliated. I was 42 years old with groceries on a credit card, a mortgage I didn't know how to pay, and a husband who had turned our bank account into a leash. The offer was bad. I knew it was bad. But bad money today can look like oxygen when you're scared. I said, send it through your attorney. He took that as progress. I could hear it. Good, he said. That's good. You're doing the smart thing. I hung up before he could say anything else. Then I called Marisol. She answered with, what's wrong? I started crying so hard I couldn't speak. 20 minutes later, she was in the grocery store parking lot, still wearing her work blouse and one hoop earring because apparently she had left the other on her desk. She opened my passenger door, got in, and took the phone from my hand. Show me, she said. I showed her the transfer. She inhaled through her nose. Okay. I can't do this. You can. No, I can't. He's going to keep doing this. Then we make this part of the record. Marisol. No. Listen to me. He wants you scared enough to sign. That's not a reason to sign. That's evidence. I laughed in a way that sounded broken. Everything is evidence to you. Because I work for attorneys, and attorneys are just librarians with sharper shoes. That made me laugh for real. One ugly little burst through tears. She put my phone back in my lap. Call Elena, right now. Elena filed an emergency motion. The court ordered Russell to return the funds and explain the transfer. He returned the money 3 days later, but the damage was done, not to me, to him. Because until then, Russell's pressure tactics had been mostly private, texts, late payments, nasty comments. Now there was a bank transfer, a declined card story, and a court order attached to his name. He had handed Elena a theme: control. Control of the accounts. Control of information. Control of cash flow. Control of my fear. And once that theme existed, every hidden transfer looked different. The forensic accountant came in during May. His name was Martin Hale, and he looked exactly like what you would get if you asked Central Casting for "man who finds money in spreadsheets." Gray beard trimmed close, wire glasses, no visible reaction to anything. He wore short-sleeved dress shirts even when it was chilly, and carried a mechanical pencil in his shirt pocket. The first time we met, he put a yellow legal pad on the conference table, looked at me over his glasses, and said, "I understand you used to keep the books." I did. Good. Then we can move faster. I liked him immediately. Elena had warned me that forensic accounting was not magic. Martin was not going to wave a wand and find a suitcase of cash. He was going to compare records, trace transactions, test claims, and look for inconsistencies. It would be slow. It would be expensive. It would require documents Russell did not want to produce. People who hide money usually think in stories, Martin said. They create a story for the court. Business is down. Expenses are up. Assets are encumbered. Cash is gone. My job is to see whether the numbers tell the same story. And if they don't? Then we ask why. That became the second rule I live by. Ask why. Why did North Star Site Services have no meaningful online presence until after its first invoice? Why did its mailing address trace to a rented mailbox near Kendra's apartment? Why were payments to North Star often made within 2 days of large customer deposits? Why did Marco Alvarez receive loan payments from the company, then appear in public photos with Kendra's family? Why did Talia Benitez get 2 checks coded differently in 2 different months? Why did Russell's claimed income fall while his personal spending rose? Why did the company suddenly pay consulting expenses in round numbers? Why did a bank statement from an old lender reference an account number we did not have in the disclosures? That last why was the hinge. It came from a document Russell's side produced by accident. At least, that's what I believe. It was part of a loan renewal packet from the previous year. We had a line of credit secured by equipment and receivables. In the packet was a personal financial statement Russell had signed 10 months before the divorce. It listed business accounts, debts, equipment, and projected revenue. Most of it matched what I knew. One line did not. Operating account, Harbor Community Credit Union. Balance, $42,118. I stared at it for so long the numbers blurred. Blackwell Custom Contracting did not bank at Harbor Community Credit Union. We used First Regional for operating and payroll. We had one equipment loan through Mason Bank. Harbor Community had been our first bank years earlier, back when we still used the dining room table, but we closed that account after a merger made their online system impossible. I remembered because I was the one who spent a whole weekend switching automatic payments. I called Elena. "There is an account," I said. "What kind of account?" "Business operating, Harbor Community. It shouldn't exist." She asked me to send the page. Then she asked me not to touch anything else until she and Martin reviewed it. Martin called the next day. He did not sound excited because I don't think Martin had that setting. But his sentences got shorter. "This is useful." "Useful how?" "It's a disclosed account to a lender, omitted from marital disclosure." "Could it be old?" "The statement is dated 10 months ago." "Could it have been closed?" "Then they can produce closing records." "And if they don't?" "Then we subpoena Harbor." I sat down slowly. This was the point where the story changed from suspicion to trail. Russell's side fought the subpoena. They called it a fishing expedition. Elena responded with the loan packet. The judge allowed it. Harbor Community produced statements for an account opened in the name of Blackwell Custom Contracting with Russell as signatory. The mailing address was not our office. It was the old business address from 6 years earlier, a mailbox at a UPS store we had used before we rented the strip office. The account had activity. A lot of activity. Customer payments had been deposited there. Not all customers. Not enough to make it obvious from outside. But certain checks, especially from smaller jobs where clients paid by paper check instead of electronic transfer, had gone to Harbor. Then money moved out in chunks. Some to North Star, some to cash withdrawals, some to payments labeled loan repayment, some to a credit card I didn't recognize. When Martin showed me the preliminary tracing, I felt cold. "How much?" I asked. "We're still reconciling." "Roughly." He looked at Elena, then back at me. Between direct deposits, vendor payments, and related transfers, we're looking at several $100,000 in transactions requiring explanation. Several $100,000. The phrase didn't feel real. It floated above the table. I thought about the grocery store. $146.82 declined while several $100,000 moved through an account I wasn't supposed to know existed. Elena put a hand on the edge of the table, not touching me, just present. "Breathe," she said. I did. That night, Russell texted me for the first time in weeks. "We need to end this before it gets uglier." I stared at the message. He knew. Maybe his attorney had told him about the subpoena return. Maybe Harbor had notified him. Maybe he just sensed the ground moving. Whatever the reason, his tone had changed. It wasn't smug. It wasn't soft. It was urgent. I screenshotted it and sent it to Elena. Then I turned my phone face down and made tea I didn't drink. The strange thing about finding hidden money is that it doesn't immediately make you feel rich. It makes you feel violated in a new way. Every transfer had a date. Dates attached themselves to memories. On March 3rd, a $12,000 customer check went into Harbor. That was the day Russell told me he couldn't make the temporary support payment on time because receivables were slow. On April 14th, Northstar received $9,500. That was 2 days after he texted me that Elena was chasing a fantasy. On April 22nd, cash was withdrawn. That was the week my card got declined. The ledger became a diary of contempt. And still, we did not have the full picture. Northstar was the next piece. Martin pulled public filings. Northstar Site Services LLC had been formed 8 months before Russell filed for divorce. The registered agent was an online service. The mailing address was the rented mailbox. The organizer name was not Russell. It was Daniel Reyes. I didn't know Daniel Reyes. Kendra did. He appeared in a public post from a family cookout, arm around Kendra's cousin, captioned with a string of heart emojis. That by itself didn't prove anything. People know people. Families are wide. But then Martin traced one Northstar payment to a bank account where Daniel Reyes was signatory, and from there to payments toward a lease on an apartment complex where Kendra had posted mirror selfies in an elevator. "We have to be careful with conclusions," Martin said. He said that a lot. "But," Elena said. Martin adjusted his glasses. "But the pattern is consistent with a related party conduit." I looked at him. He translated. "A shell vendor." There it was. The phrase I had been afraid to say because saying it made the whole thing feel enormous. Shell vendor. Russell had created or used a vendor that did little or no real work, paid it from company funds, then let money flow through people connected to his girlfriend's orbit. On paper, the business looked less profitable. In real life, money moved where he thought I wouldn't follow. He had mistaken complexity for invisibility, but complexity was exactly where I was comfortable. For the next 2 months, my life narrowed to documents. I worked part-time for a local medical billing company by then, because I needed income and because sitting in the house all day with old records was making me feel like a ghost. I would leave work at 4, stop at my mother's to eat something, then go home and spend evenings building timelines. I had a folding table in the living room because the dining room table was too small. Bank statements on the left, invoices in the middle, legal pad on the right. Sticky notes everywhere. Yellow for customer deposits, blue for Northstar, pink for loans, green for personal spending. The house looked like a paper storm. Marisol came over twice a week with food and bossiness. "You need vegetables," she'd say, setting containers in the fridge. "I need account statements." "You need both. Judges prefer plaintiffs who don't die of sodium." She made me laugh when I didn't want to. She also kept me from spiraling. Every time I wanted to send Russell a message that said, "I know what you did," she reminded me that surprise was worth more than satisfaction. Let him think you're scared, she said. I am scared. Even better. Authentic performance. That was Marisol, tender as a brick, but she showed up. Denise showed up too, in her own way. She gave a declaration through Elena. She did it carefully. No stolen documents, no drama. Just her observations. North Star invoices with vague descriptions, Russell instructing her to process them. Her questions about W-9 forms, the loans to Marco and Talia. His instruction to stop discussing finances with me before he filed. Her notes from dates and check numbers. Russell found out about her declaration within a week. He fired her. Officially, it was for performance and confidentiality concerns. Unofficially, it was because she told the truth. Denise called me from her driveway the day it happened. Her voice was steady in the way people sound when they're trying not to fall apart. He walked me out like I stole something, she said. I'm so sorry. Don't be, I already had another interview. Still. Carmen, I watched him do things I knew were wrong and I told myself it wasn't my marriage, it wasn't my business. Then he looked me in the face today and said loyalty matters. Loyalty. She laughed once. I'm done being scared of that man. Her firing became another piece of the pattern. Retaliation, pressure, control. Russell thought he was cutting off a weak link. He had no idea he was turning a reluctant witness into a committed one. By August, the case had moved from divorce dispute to something sharper. Elena amended our requests. She sought sanctions. She asked for fees related to uncovering concealed assets. She alleged breach of fiduciary duty based on deliberate concealment and dissipation of marital assets. Those words mattered. Marriage is not just romance in the eyes of a court. It is also a financial relationship with duties attached. You don't get to hide marital property, lie in disclosures, and then shrug because divorce is uncomfortable. Russell's response was exactly what you would expect from a man whose whole strategy depended on pretending he was the reasonable one. He got offended. His attorney filed declarations calling our claims speculative and inflammatory. Russell claimed North Star performed legitimate consulting services. He claimed the Harbor account was an old account used for segregated project funds. He claimed the loans were advances related to potential subcontractor relationships. He claimed any omissions were inadvertent and caused by the stress of litigation. Inadvertent. That word did a lot of work for a man who had used an old mailing address, a separate bank, vague invoices, related people, and a financial disclosure that forgot every dollar he didn't want seen. Elena read his declaration across her conference table and made a mark with her pen beside one paragraph. He just locked himself into a story, she said. Is that good? It can be. Stories can be tested. Martin loved tested stories. He built a schedule that compared Russell's explanations to documents. If North Star performed consulting, where were the contracts? Where were the scopes of work? Who communicated with them? Which job files referenced their services? Why did field staff not know them? Why were invoices round-numbered and vague? Why did payments correlate with deposits into the hidden Harbor account? Why did funds then move to people tied to Kendra? For the loans, he asked for promissory notes, repayment schedules, board approval, emails, anything. There were none. Marco Alvarez received $18,000 across 3 checks. Talia Benitez received $11,500 across 2. No repayments, no services, no tax forms that made sense. No reason for a contracting business to lend money to the girlfriend's relatives while telling a court it had cash flow problems. For the Harbor account, Martin traced deposits from at least 9 customers. He matched check images to invoices from jobs Russell had claimed were paid into regular operating. He found transfers from Harbor to North Star, from Harbor to cash, from Harbor to a personal credit card. He found one payment that made me sit back in my chair and close my eyes. A deposit from the Whitcomb basement remodel. $23,750. I knew that job. I knew the clients. I had brought them in. Mrs. Whitcomb used to work with my mother at the school district. She had hugged me at the end of the project and said, "Tell Russell the crew was wonderful." That check went into the harbor account 3 days after it was written. Russell had taken money from a client who trusted both of us and used it to make the marital estate look smaller. I stopped thinking of it as his affair after that. It was theft from our life. In September, Elena deposed Russell. I was allowed to attend, but she prepared me beforehand. "You do not react," she said. "No facial expressions, no sighing, no whispering. He will say things that are false. Let him. The transcript is the point." The deposition took place in a conference room at his attorney's office. Beige walls again, a pitcher of water sweating on a side table, a court reporter with fast fingers. Russell wore a gray suit I had helped him pick out for a Home Builders Association dinner 3 years earlier. He looked thinner, but not in a sympathetic way. He looked sharpened by resentment. He avoided looking at me until we were all seated. Then he gave me the smile. I looked at the court reporter's machine. Elena started calmly. Marriage history. Business history. His role. My role. He minimized me immediately. "Carmen helped with clerical tasks early on," he said. Clerical tasks. I wrote the words on my legal pad so I wouldn't say them out loud. Elena asked, "Who created the initial bookkeeping system for Blackwell Custom Contracting?" Russell shifted. "I don't recall." "You don't recall whether you created it?" "It was a long time ago." "Did you know how to use QuickBooks in 2010? His attorney objected to form. Russell answered anyway. "Basic functions." That was generous. In 2010, Russell thought reconciliation meant saying sorry. Elena moved on. She asked about North Star. Russell said they provided business development consulting and site logistics advice. "Who is your contact there?" "Daniel." "Daniel Reyes?" "I believe so." "Where did you meet Mr. Reyes?" "Through industry contacts." "Which industry contacts?" "I don't remember specifically." "Do you have any written contracts with North Star?" "Not formal contracts." "Emails?" "I'd have to check." "Texts?" "Possibly." "Can you identify one project where North Star provided site logistics advice?" He named the Beaumont edition. I felt Elena's foot touch mine under the table. Not a kick. A warning. "Stay still." The Beaumont edition had a complete job file. No North Star notes. No Daniel Reyes. No site logistics issue. Nothing. Elena let the answer sit. Then she asked about Harbor. Russell said the account was opened for segregated project funds and kept separate for accounting clarity. "Who performed the accounting for the Harbor account?" "I oversaw it." "Did you provide statements for the Harbor account in your initial financial disclosure?" "I believed all relevant accounts were disclosed." "That wasn't my question." His jaw tightened. "No." "Did you disclose the Harbor account in response to my client's first request for production?" "Not specifically." "Did you disclose it in response to the court's temporary order requiring production of business account statements?" His attorney objected. Russell took a drink of water. "I relied on counsel." Elena nodded as if that answered something. It didn't. That was the beauty of it. She pulled out an exhibit. "This is a personal financial statement you signed for Mason Bank 10 months before filing for divorce. It lists Harbor Community Credit Union with a balance of $42,118. Do you see that?" "Yes." "So you knew the account existed?" "I didn't say I didn't know." "You just didn't disclose it." His attorney objected again. Elena moved on before he could recover. The deposition lasted 5 hours. By the end, Russell had said enough to help us and not enough to save himself. He had admitted the account existed. He had admitted Northstar had no formal contracts. He had admitted Marco and Talia were not employees. He had admitted he did not list certain transfers as distributions to himself. He had admitted Kendra was his girlfriend, though he tried to call her a personal relationship, which made even the court reporter blink. In the elevator after, my knees started shaking. Elena noticed. "You did well," she said. "I didn't do anything." "Exactly." That night, Russell called from a blocked number. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. At first, there was only breathing. Then, "You think you're clever. You think because you found some account, you're going to take me down. You don't know what you're doing. You're going to wreck the company, Carmen. You're going to hurt the guys. You're going to hurt everyone because you can't accept that it's over." There was a pause. Then his voice dropped. "I built that business. Me, not you. You sat at a computer. Don't forget that." The voicemail ended. I saved it. I sent it to Elena. Then I sat on the kitchen floor for a while because sometimes the body goes back to the place where the first wound happened. He built that business. Me, not you. I thought about the first winter when we had $312 in the business account, and I delayed my own dental appointment so we could buy a used tile saw. I thought about the year I worked mornings at the plumbing supply company and evenings on our invoices because we couldn't pay me from the business yet. I thought about the Sunday nights, the receipts, the sales tax filings, the calls to clients who loved Russell on site, but somehow forgot to mail checks until I reminded them. I had sat at a computer. I had also kept the business alive long enough for him to mistake himself for the only person who mattered. The trial was set for November, but most divorce cases settle before trial. Russell assumed ours would too. He kept sending offers. Each one moved slightly, never enough. A little more cash, a slightly higher business value, a promise to pay some fees if I released all claims. Every offer had the same heartbeat. Take less. Stop looking. Elena advised me carefully. She was not reckless. She explained risks. Judges are human. Trials cost money. Concealment cases can be strong and still produce imperfect outcomes. The court could award me my share of hidden assets, fees, sanctions, or a disproportionate division, but nothing was guaranteed. "I need you to understand the difference between a good case and a certain case," she said. "I do." "Do you?" I looked at the offer on the table. It was more money than Russell had offered in February. Enough to pay some debt. Enough to make the immediate fear stop. Not enough to account for what he'd done. "If I sign this," I said, "he gets to say it worked." Elena didn't answer right away. "That's not a legal factor," she said finally. "I know. But it's a human one." "Yes." She nodded. "Then we prepare." Preparing for trial is nothing like people imagine. It is not one dramatic montage. It is weeks of small grinding tasks, exhibit lists, witness prep, updated schedules, calls with Martin, calls with Denise, reviewing transcripts, correcting dates, finding cleaner copies, making sure every number ties to a document, making sure every document has a foundation, making sure outrage does not outrun proof. Martin built what he called a funds flow chart. I called it the map. At the center was Blackwell Custom Contracting. On one side, legitimate operating account, payroll, suppliers, taxes, ordinary expenses. On the other side, Harbor Community Credit Union. From Harbor, arrows went to North Star, cash withdrawals, Marco, Talia, and a credit card. From North Star, arrows went to Daniel Reyes and related payments. From Marco and Talia, arrows tied back to Kendra's family connections through public records and bank information we had obtained lawfully. The chart did not scream. It didn't need to. It sat there in clean boxes and arrows, calm as a loaded trap. The total Martin identified as concealed, diverted, or inadequately explained was $318,640. That number became the spine of the case. Not all of it would necessarily be awarded to me. Law is not as simple as bad person loses all money. But deliberate concealment matters. Breach of fiduciary duty matters. Courts do not like being lied to. Courts especially do not like a spouse hiding assets while claiming poverty and forcing the other spouse to spend money finding them. Elena's requested remedy was aggressive, but grounded. She asked the court to award me a disproportionate share of the concealed and recovered assets, to assign certain questionable transfers to Russell's side of the ledger, to order him to pay my forensic accounting fees and a significant portion of attorney's fees, and to value the business based on corrected income rather than his reduced fantasy version. In plain English, she asked the judge to make hiding money more expensive than telling the truth would have been. The night before trial, I barely slept. I lay in bed listening to the heater click on and off. The house felt too big. Russell's side of the closet was empty. The office was full of boxes. My future depended partly on a woman in a robe deciding whether the pattern we saw was as clear as it felt. At 3:12 in the morning, I got up and walked into the kitchen. The table was clean. I had made sure of it. No papers, no coffee mugs, no envelopes. Just the same laminate table with the heat bubble in the corner. I stood where I had stood the day Russell said, "You'll get half of nothing." Then I turned off the light and went back to bed. Trial started at 9 a.m. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, even though I had been in it before. It felt smaller because now every sound mattered. The scrape of chairs, the rustle of exhibits, the bailiff saying all rise. Russell sat at the other table with his attorney. He did not look at me. Kendra was not there. I had wondered if she would come. Part of me wanted her to. Not for drama, for education. Elena's opening was quiet. She did not call Russell evil. She did not call him a thief in the first sentence. She told the judge this was a case about disclosure, about a spouse who controlled the business records, filed for divorce, claimed the marital estate had little value, and omitted accounts and transfers that told a different story. She said the evidence would show a pattern: understated income, shell vendor payments, loans to the girlfriend's relatives, a hidden bank account, pressure tactics when I asked questions. Then she quoted him. "Mr. Blackwell told my client she would get half of nothing," Elena said. "The evidence will show he tried to make that true." I looked down at my hands. Russell's attorney opened with stress, confusion, business complexity, and marital bitterness. He said contractors have messy books. He said small businesses move money between accounts. He said my involvement had been historic, not current. He said my team was turning ordinary transactions into sinister theories because I was hurt by the end of the marriage. Hurt. As if hurt had created the harbor account. I testified first. Elena walked me through the early years, how we started, what I did, how the books were set up, how revenue normally flowed, what my role became after Denise was hired, what changed before the divorce, the papers at the kitchen table, the proposal, the line, the account being emptied, the records I gathered, the things I noticed. Russell's attorney cross-examined me for nearly 2 hours. He tried to make me sound emotional. He asked about the affair. He asked if I was angry. I said yes, because only a fool would say no. Then I said anger did not create bank records. He asked if I had a degree in accounting. I said no. He asked if I was a CPA. I said no. He asked if I had personally seen Northstar fail to perform work. I said I had not been on every job site. He asked if I understood that contracting businesses sometimes use consultants. I said yes. Then he made a mistake. So really, he said, your conclusions are based on assumptions. I looked at Elena for half a second. She did not move. I turned back to him. My questions were based on records. Mr. Hale's conclusions are based on tracing. The judge looked up. Russell's attorney moved on. Denise testified after me. She wore a black blazer and held her hands folded in her lap. She looked nervous, but she did not waver. She explained the invoices, the missing details, the W-9 concern, the checks to Marco and Talia. Russell telling her not to discuss finances with me, Russell firing her after her declaration. Russell stared at the table during most of it. When his attorney cross-examined her, he suggested she was disgruntled because she had been terminated. Denise nodded. I was terminated after I raised concerns and after I cooperated in this case. I am disgruntled about that. Even the judge's mouth twitched. Then Martin took the stand. If the story has a moment where the temperature changed, it was that. Not because Martin was dramatic, because he wasn't. He explained his credentials. He explained tracing. He explained that he does not decide legal intent. He follows money and reports inconsistencies. He used phrases like source document, bank activity, related party indicators, and unexplained variance. He walked through revenue comparisons from prior years. He showed that active job volume did not support the sharp income drop Russell claimed. He showed customer payments deposited outside the disclosed operating account. Then Elena asked to display the funds flow chart. The screen at the front of the courtroom flickered blue, then white. Martin's chart appeared. Blackwell Custom Contracting sat in a box at the top. Below it, 2 branches. Disclosed operating account, Harbor Community Credit Union. From Harbor, the arrows spread. North Star Site Services. Cash withdrawals, Marco Alvarez, Talia Benitez, unidentified credit card. From North Star, more arrows. Daniel Reyes, lease payments, transfers with no business support. The courtroom went quiet in a way I had never heard before. Not silent. Courtrooms are never silent. There is always paper, air, breathing. But the human noise stopped. No shifting, no whispering, no pen taps. Russell looked at the screen. For the first time all day, his face changed. Not a lot. If you didn't know him, you might have missed it. But I knew every version of Russell Blackwell. I knew the charming client face, the tired husband face, the annoyed boss face, the smug kitchen table face. This was none of them. This was calculation failing. His eyes moved from box to box, Harbor to North Star to Daniel, Harbor to Marco, Harbor to Talia. He swallowed. His right hand, the one with the scar by the thumb, curled slowly against the table. Martin explained the chart like he was describing plumbing. Customer checks entered the Harbor account. Funds then moved out in patterns inconsistent with the explanations provided. For example, on March 3rd, a $23,750 customer payment from the Whitcomb project was deposited to Harbor. On March 5th, $9,500 was paid to North Star Site Services. On March 7th, $4,000 was transferred from North Star's account to an account ending in 4412, controlled by Daniel Reyes. I found no contract, invoice detail, field report, or communication supporting legitimate services by North Star on that project. Elena asked, was the Whitcomb payment disclosed in the operating account records initially produced? No. Was the Harbor account disclosed in Mr. Blackwell's initial financial disclosure? No. Were you able to identify business purposes for the transfers to Marco Alvarez and Talia Benitez? No. Yes. Were either of them employees? No. Subcontractors? I found no support for that. Did you identify a relationship between those individuals and Ms. Benitez? Russell's attorney objected. The judge allowed a limited answer based on documents. Martin said, based on public records and produced bank information, they appear connected to Ms. Benitez's family or close personal circle. Ms. Benitez, Kendra. The girlfriend whose caption said finally being chosen feels different. I did not look at Russell. Not yet. Elena took Martin through the total. $318,640 in concealed, diverted, or inadequately explained transactions. Some direct. Some traced through related entities. Some assigned as questionable transfers. All of it documented. Then came cross-examination. Russell's attorney tried to make Martin concede uncertainty. Martin did, where appropriate. He was careful. He said he could not testify to Russell's state of mind. He said he could not say every dollar was stolen. He said some records were incomplete. He said better documentation from Russell could have clarified certain items. Then Russell's attorney asked, "So you can't tell this court that North Star performed no services whatsoever?" Martin adjusted his glasses. "I can tell the court that I requested support for the services described, reviewed the documents produced, compared them to job files and payment records, and found no reliable evidence that the payments matched legitimate services." That wasn't my question. It is my answer. The judge wrote something down. When Russell testified, the whole thing tightened. His attorney led him gently. Business stress, market shifts, messy contracting practices, accounts used for convenience, North Star as a consultant, loans as potential business development. Mistakes in disclosure caused by haste, not malice. He sounded rehearsed. Maybe because he was. Then Elena stood. She carried one folder to the podium. Just one. That worried him more than a stack would have. Russell was used to burying people in paper. Elena had chosen a blade. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, "you told this court the harbor account was used for segregated project funds." "Yes." "Which projects?" "Various projects." "Name 3. He blinked. "I don't have the list in front of me." "Name 1 besides Whitcomb." "Beaumont." Elena opened the folder. "You testified in deposition that North Star provided site logistics advice on Beaumont." "Yes." "And today, you're testifying harbor was used for Beaumont project funds." "I believe so." "Please look at Exhibit 42. The exhibit went up. Beaumont job ledger. Payments, deposits, expenses, no harbor deposit, no North Star support beyond a vague invoice paid from the regular operating account. Can you identify where the Beaumont customer payment entered harbor?" Russell leaned toward the screen. "I'd need to review." "Take your time." He stared. There was nothing there. "I can't identify it from this document." "Because it isn't there?" His attorney objected. Sustained as to form. Elena nodded and moved on. She asked about Marco Alvarez. Russell said Marco was being considered for subcontracting work. "What trade?" "General labor." "Did he perform any work?" "Not ultimately." "So why did the company pay him $18,000? "It was in advance." "For work he did not do?" "For availability." "Do you have a written agreement?" "No." "Insurance certificate?" "No." "W-9? "I believe so." "It was produced after my client requested records, correct?" "I don't know." "Is Marco Alvarez related to Kendra Benitez?" He looked at his attorney. "I don't know." Elena let that sit for 1 second. "You don't know whether your girlfriend's cousin received $18,000 from your company?" His attorney objected. The judge overruled. Russell's face went red at the neck. "I don't know her whole family tree." "But you knew Kendra Benitez at the time." "Yes." "You were in a romantic relationship with her." "Yes." "And company funds went to people connected to her while you were preparing to divorce your wife." "That's not how I would characterize it." "How would you characterize it?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out right away. That was the first crack the whole room could see. Elena did not pounce. She just turned a page. Let's talk about your statement to my client. Russell's eyes flicked to me then, just once. Which statement? You told her she would get half of nothing. His attorney objected on relevance. Elena argued it went to intent and credibility in context of financial disclosures. The judge allowed limited questioning. Elena asked again, "Did you tell Carmen she would get half of nothing?" Russell gave a small laugh, like the question was beneath him. It sounded awful in that room. It was a figure of speech. What did you mean by it? That there wasn't much to divide. At the time you said that, had you disclosed the Harbor account? No. Had you disclosed the North Star payments? They were in the business records. Had you produced those records? Not yet. Had you disclosed the payments to Marco Alvarez and Talia Benitez? No. Had you told my client that customer checks were being deposited into an account she did not know about? It wasn't her role to know every account. There it was. Not her role. I felt Elena go still. The judge looked up again. Elena's voice stayed even. Mr. Blackwell, who set up your bookkeeping system when Blackwell Custom Contracting began? He looked trapped by a question too simple to dodge. Carmen helped. Who handled accounts payable and receivable for years? She did some of that. Who trained Denise Keller? Carmen. Who reconciled the bank accounts before Miss Keller was hired? Carmen. Who prepared records for your tax accountant in the early years? His jaw worked. Carmen. Elena stepped slightly to the side so the screen with Martin's chart was visible behind her. So when you told your wife she would get half of nothing, and when you later omitted the Harbor account, and when you claimed reduced income, you knew she understood the books. I didn't omit anything intentionally. That wasn't my question. He looked at the judge. The judge looked back without helping him. Elena repeated it. You knew she understood the books. The room held its breath. Russell said, "She understood what I let her see." It was such an ugly answer that for a second nobody moved. And then I watched him realize it. Not the money. Not yet. The sentence. He realized he had said the quiet part in a courtroom, on a record, in front of a judge who had been listening to him pretend this was all confusion and stress. She understood what I let her see. His eyes shifted to Elena, then to the court reporter, then to the judge. His mouth tightened. His attorney leaned toward him, but there was nothing to retrieve. The words had landed. They sat there in the air like a signed confession to control. That was the beginning of the understanding moment, but not the end. The end came later when the judge asked her own questions. Judges do that sometimes, not always. But after both attorneys finished, she looked at Martin's chart, then at Russell. Mr. Blackwell, she said, why was the Harbor account mailed to an old business address? Russell sat up. That was just the address on file. For 6 years? I didn't update it. You updated other accounts, I suppose. Why were customer payments deposited there instead of the disclosed operating account? Convenience. Whose convenience? He swallowed. Mine. The judge wrote something. Why was your wife not informed of the account during dissolution? I relied on counsel and records. That does not answer the question. His lips pressed together. I didn't think it was necessary. An account receiving marital business funds during the marriage was not necessary to disclose in a divorce? He looked smaller suddenly. That is the only way I can describe it. Not physically. Russell was still 6 feet tall. Still in his gray suit. Still the man who could fill a room when clients were watching. But something in him shrank under direct questions he could not charm, bully, or invoice his way around. The judge turned to the chart again. And North Star Site Services, you are asking this court to accept that substantial payments were made to this entity for legitimate business purposes, despite limited documentation, vague invoices, no corroborating project records, and transfers connected to individuals in your girlfriend's circle. His attorney started to object, then stopped. Maybe there was nothing to object to. Maybe he was tired. The judge asked, "Is that your position?" Russell said, "Yes." But it came out quiet. Elena had one redirect question after that. Just one. She asked Martin, if the harbor account and related transfers had been disclosed at the beginning of this case, would your work have been reduced? Martin said, substantially. Can you estimate how much of your fees were incurred tracing assets not voluntarily disclosed? Most of them. That was the fee hook. Clean, simple, devastating. The judge took the matter under advisement. That means you don't always get an answer that day. People think climax means the gavel falls and everyone gasps. Real life often makes you wait in a hallway with vending machines. We waited 6 weeks. During those 6 weeks, Russell tried one last settlement offer. It came through counsel. It was the biggest offer yet, and it included confidentiality language. Elena read it, looked at me, and said, "He's worried. Should I take it?" She went through the numbers, the risk, the fees, the chance the judge could award less, the chance she could award more. She never told me what to do. Good attorneys don't make your life choices and call it advice. I thought about it for 2 days. Then I said no. Not because I needed every possible dollar. Because the offer still required me to help him bury the finding. Confidentiality. No admission. Each side bears certain fees. He wanted to buy the ending after losing control of the middle. I was done letting him choose the story. The ruling came by email on a Monday morning in December. Elena called first. "Are you sitting down?" My knees went weak so fast I sat on the edge of the bed. "Is it bad?" "No," she said. "It's very good." The court found that Russell had failed to disclose the harbor account, that his explanations for North Star and related transfers were not credible, and that the evidence supported deliberate concealment and dissipation of marital assets. The judge assigned the $318,640 in concealed or inadequately explained transactions to Russell's side for purposes of division, then awarded me a disproportionate share of the recovered marital estate to account for his breach of fiduciary duty. She also ordered him to pay Martin's forensic accounting fees and a substantial portion of my attorney's fees. The final numbers took me a minute to understand. After the corrected business valuation, hidden asset allocation, fee award, and property division, I was receiving far more than half of what Russell had admitted existed. Not because the judge gave me a windfall, because Russell had tried to make the marital estate look smaller, and the court refused to reward him for it. He had promised me half of nothing. Instead, hiding the nothing cost him most of what he hid. I didn't scream. I didn't dance. I didn't call him. I sat on the edge of my bed with the phone in my hand and cried quietly, because relief can feel a lot like grief when it finally arrives. I cried for the marriage I thought I had. I cried for the woman in the grocery store parking lot. I cried for every Sunday night I had sat with receipts while Russell slept. I cried because the truth had not fixed everything, but it had stood up in a room where he thought money was the only language. Marisol came over with grocery bags again, because apparently that was her love language. She walked in, saw my face, and froze. Good tears or bad tears? Good. She put the bags on the counter and said, "Thank God," because I brought champagne and rotisserie chicken, and I didn't know which one we'd need first. We needed both. Russell did not take the ruling gracefully. There were post-order motions, complaints, accusations that the judge misunderstood small business operations, a threat to appeal that became quieter after his attorney withdrew, and a new attorney apparently explained math to him. The fee order hurt him badly. So did the corrected business valuation. So did the fact that the company now had lenders asking questions because concealment in a divorce does not always stay neatly inside family court. I don't know every consequence that hit him afterward, and I don't need to. I know he had to sell the lake lot he bought through a holding company he thought I didn't know about. Martin found that too, late in the process, because of a property tax payment that passed through the wrong account. I know he had to refinance equipment. I know 2 crew leads left within 3 months, and Denise, in the most Denise move possible, ended up working for one of them when he started his own small remodeling company. I know Kendra's steakhouse posts stopped. Her profile went private around the time Marco got subpoenaed for records. And I know Russell eventually sent one email directly to me, even though he wasn't supposed to. It said, "I hope you're happy. You ruined everything we built." I read it once. Then I forwarded it to Elena. I did not answer. Because here is the part people like Russell never understand. I did not ruin what we built. I protected my half of it from the man who decided my work only counted when it served him. The business had been ours when the invoices needed entering. Ours when vendors needed paying. Ours when taxes were due. Ours when I skipped paychecks so the crew could get theirs. Ours when my mother's dining room table held cabinet samples because our dining room table held bank statements. But the moment it had value, Russell tried to make it his. Then, when even that wasn't enough, he tried to make it disappear. The court didn't punish him for leaving me. People are allowed to leave marriages. People are allowed to fall out of love, even cruelly. People are allowed to start over, although I recommend not starting over with a public caption and your girlfriend's relatives in the payment trail. The court punished him for lying, for hiding, for using control of money as a weapon, for looking at the woman who built the books and assuming she would be too scared to read them. I moved out of the house the following spring, not because I had to, because I wanted a place with no kitchen table history. I rented a small townhouse with good light and terrible closet space. I bought a round dining table secondhand from a retired teacher who told me it had hosted a lot of honest meals. I liked that. I put it by the window. For a while, I still woke up at 3 a.m. worrying about money. Fear doesn't leave just because a judge signs an order. It leaves in pieces. The first time I paid rent without checking my balance 3 times, a piece left. The first time I bought groceries and the card approved without my chest tightening, another piece left. The first time I opened a spreadsheet for my new job and felt competence instead of dread, another piece left. I eventually started doing bookkeeping for small contractors again, but on my terms. Clean contracts, separate passwords, monthly reviews, no handshake chaos, no owner who says, "Just enter it the way I told you." I have a little speech I give new clients. It is polite, but firm. I don't help people hide money. I tell them. I help people know where it is. Most of them laugh. The good ones understand I'm serious. One of my first clients after everything was over was a roofer named Paul, who brought receipts in a shoebox and apologized 3 times before he sat down. He reminded me of Russell in the early years, before ego turned every correction into an insult. Paul said, "I'm bad at this stuff. Just tell me what you need." That sentence almost made me cry, which would have been difficult to explain to a man holding 3 months of fuel receipts. I told him what I needed: bank access, invoice copies, a clean vendor list, no mystery payments. He nodded and said, "That's fair." It was such a small thing, but it felt like proof that business did not have to mean bullying. Numbers could be honest. Work could be honest. A person could admit what they didn't know without making someone else smaller. The last time I saw Russell was not in court. It was at the county recorder's office, of all places, where we both had to sign a document related to transferring the house. He looked older, not ruined. I know people want villains ruined beyond recognition, but life is usually less cinematic. He still had the truck, still had the watch, still had that way of standing like space owed him rent. But the shine was gone. We sat in 2 chairs outside a clerk's window, a printer jammed somewhere behind the counter. A man in work boots argued softly about a permit fee. Russell held a folder on his knee and did not look at me for the first 10 minutes. Then he said, "Was it worth it?" I looked at him. There were a lot of things I could have said. I could have said yes. I could have said you made it worth it. I could have said, "Remember when you told me I'd get half of nothing?" But I had learned something by then. Not every callback needs to be spoken to the person who earned it. Sometimes the fact that they remember is enough. So I said, "I'm just here to sign." He looked away. The clerk called our names. We signed. His hand shook slightly on the second page. Mine didn't. That was the real ending for me. Not the ruling, not the money, not the chart. That small county office with bad fluorescent lights, where the man who once controlled every account could not get me to spend one extra emotion on him. If there is a lesson in this, it is not that every hidden asset case ends neatly. They don't. Some people hide money well. Some people run out the clock. Some people get away with more than they should. But I learned that contempt makes people sloppy. Greed makes them impatient. And when someone has spent years benefiting from your competence, they may forget that the same competence still belongs to you after they stop respecting you. Russell forgot I knew the accounts. He forgot I knew the rhythm of the business. He forgot I knew what normal looked like, which meant I could recognize a lie wearing work boots and a vendor number. Most of all, he forgot that half of nothing is still a number. And if you know how to read the books, you can prove when nothing was never nothing at all. So if you're listening to this while sitting in your own quiet kitchen, staring at papers someone handed you like your life was already decided, hear me clearly. Don't threaten. Don't announce. Don't chase every rumor. Get calm enough to get records. Get help from people who know the system. Keep your hands clean. Ask why. And when the person who underestimated you starts smiling because they think silence means surrender, let them smile. Sometimes silence is just the sound of someone adding columns.